Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Not subcultural, not anti-cultural, but countercultural in the best ways possible.
Well, how's everybody doing? Good. It's good to be with you today. That baptism, that's worth celebrating all over again, isn't it? Like, I love stories like that. I got to tell you, my day today has not gone exactly as I anticipated. Some of you get my weekly email, the note from Greg, we call it. And, today I chose to mention that I got an anonymous letter and a little question about are tattoos sinful. And I got to tell you, I got more replies to this note from Greg than I have in a long time. I think ever since I announced our son's adoption, I haven't had as much response to a note from Greg. So that's been fun, mostly positive and good to interact with. It's always helpful to me. And of course, some of the interaction, and I think even some of the angst that exists right now is that we've encouraged you to take this series seriously, to take Fervor seriously, to take the chapter of Romans chapter 12 seriously, so seriously, in fact, that we actually have commissioned a tattoo artist who is going to do tattoos. And you don't have to clap for that. It's okay. But I do want you to know that I didn't want you to sign up in weeks 1 or 2 of this series. I want you to get this tattoo if this is the kind of thing that you think, yep, this should mark my life, not just my skin, right? This is who I am. It is shaping me. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. And so we have it set up. There's one day. There's a very limited number of slots. And if you want to make sure you're in on that, then you can use this QR code. You can use the same QR code. It's actually on the back of all the seats. This will actually get you to a place where you can sign up for my weekly email, which is the email group that we will use to send out the details on Monday. It'll have 3 different pictures of tattoos that you could get. It will have the time slots. It'll have all the details on how much it costs, those sorts of things. So if you're interested, make sure you sign up for the note from Greg. And who knows what I'll write about in the note from Greg next week. Probably a Bears victory from week 1 this coming Sunday. We'll see. So one other piece of good news for you. Many of you know that Jessica Wright, who leads worship for us almost all the time, is married to Mitch Wright, who shows up on the platform pretty often himself. And they had their baby last week. So this is Callum Brewer Wright. And, you know how much we love Mitch and Jess around here, how much I love them. And I just think Cal is fortunate to come into that home. He's not face palming right there. That's not what happened when he, but everyone's healthy, everyone's happy. We just celebrate with them. So back to the series that we're in. This is about fervor, and it's about Romans chapter 12, verse 11. This verse is in the middle of chapter 12, and no single message in this 5-week series is about the verse. It kind of actually is just the keystone verse, the foundational verse. It's the verse that everything leads up to, and then everything for the rest of this series explodes out of. It is a verse that says, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Will you all say it out loud with me one more time? Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. And this is wild to me, but a couple of weeks ago, about 200 of you said, all right, I'll serve the Lord. And you signed up to shadow in different places around here. Today's actually been kind of amazing. I was doing my sound check about an hour ago, and there's people shadowing for the band. I walked up to drop off my notes in the booth up there. There's people shadowing in the booth. I was in the commons area, and I see guest experience, and I see kids ministry meeting with people. I'm like, it's so amazing to me because when you start to serve Christ here, it's like you're in the game, and you're in the mix of what God is doing here. You celebrate these baptisms even more. It's just amazing to me. But when I say that the rest of the passage, which we begin today coming out of this verse, explodes. I want you to hear that as something very serious. You know, we've kind of been leading our way through this. There's a fervor around it. But the rest of the passage does not, and life, of course, does not, tie a nice bow on it and say, well, if you start serving, then God will take care of you and you'll never have any problems in life. That is not the story of the scriptures. It's certainly not the story of Romans chapter 12. When I say explodes, I don't actually mean that it explodes in a beautiful way, like fireworks, you know. I don't mean it explodes in an inspiring way, like an Olympian, you know, coming with that last surge across the finish line. When I say explodes, actually what I might mean is implodes, because the scriptures are very honest that all of human life has an element of brokenness and suffering in it. And this passage decides to lean into that honestly, to talk about the deep and serious trouble that comes with life. And it's kind of asking the question, and fortunately for us, answering the question, what do you do with the real pain of life? What do you do? Now, I want you to know that I know some of you have experienced brutally painful things in this life. And I see you. I'm grateful that you had come to a place like this with all that you have already endured in life. And I know that some of you, even right now, are just barely holding it together. And when I say barely holding it together, I don't mean that you're barely holding it together emotionally in this public place that you might break down. I don't want you to feel the pressure to hold it together. You can break down here. What I mean is many of you may feel like you're barely holding it together with life right now. That literally your marriage is teetering. And there is some deep and serious trouble. And you're not sure whether it's going to hold together. Or your marriage already collapsed. And now you're in a place that you didn't imagine that you would be, but it is deep and serious trouble, and you're not sure what to do right now. Some of you carry guilt from a choice that you made, and it is racking you inside. You are feeling the shame of it. You're wondering who you might say it to out loud. You carry that guilt, and it fries people's nerves after a little while because inside of you it is eating, and it is a deep and serious trouble. Some of you have lost a relationship with one of your kids. It's very hard to imagine things in life actually that are more painful with that, but it feels like life's unraveling. Like that relationship, not only, it's not just kind of bad. It's like you're not even sure if there's hope that it could be better again one day. Some of you have things going on in your health right now, and you are not telling people how bad it is, but you know how bad it is. And these are things of deep and serious trouble in our lives. There's feelings, of course, that go along with these. Many of us experience these feelings. They're feelings of frustration, sometimes of rage or anger that comes out. Certainly the feelings of being perplexed or not knowing what the next step is. In mental health terms, we speak of anxiety, and some of you experienced that, and you feel like you're just tied up in knots. We speak of depression, and maybe the main marker of depression is that everything looks gray or maybe black. Very dark. It shapes every choice that you have, and you actually kind of know it's shaping the choices that you have, and it's shaping them in horrible ways, but you can't figure out a way out of it. And this is real. It's a deep and serious trouble. And I got to tell you that, when I talk to people in the Commons area after a service, I enjoy as much as the next person to have a laugh with someone out there, to celebrate some good news. That's great. But there's something in me that is drawn to the people in the Commons area who were brave enough to come. And you can just kind of see it on their face. They need someone to stop. They need a voice with some hope. Someone to encourage them to endure. Someone who would pray with them right then and there. And I try to do that. Some of you even try to do that. I love that because This is that kind of place. And you might think that the people who go through that, or you might be afraid to admit that you're going through it because you think, oh, those people are sissies. They are not sissies. This is the human experience that we all at different times experience deep and serious trouble, and we have to figure out what to do with it. Just as an example, I wanted to give you three of what I think are three of the toughest guys in the Bible who, on their dark days, could acknowledge life feels like it's imploding right now. I don't know if you know the story of Elijah from the Old Testament, but very short part of this story, Elijah was a prophet. He was in so many ways a bold man who stood up for God. There were people who were denigrating God. There were people who were saying God wasn't real. And Elijah would go toe-to-toe with them. In fact, shortly before the passage I'm about to read you, he went toe-to-toe with a group and literally called down fire from heaven. And it came. And he saw it. And he won the standoff. But it's not uncommon, actually, that after a really high, people experience a really low. And this was what it says in 1 Kings. This is what Elijah says. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and he prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. He was in a dark place, in some deep and serious trouble. What do when you're in that place? David, King David, the one they built a beautiful statue of that, is in Rome. King David, the one who as a boy killed a bear with his bare hands, and the one who conquered Goliath, the giant, the David of David and Goliath. Tough guy, strong man. In Psalm 42, he writes, my soul, it's just downcast within me. There's a darkness that has overwhelmed me. I'm not celebrating wars that have won, places that I've conquered, places I was faithful. I'm in a place right now that is deep and serious trouble, and it's dark inside right now. And maybe the strongest of them all, Jesus of Nazareth. A man who walked out of a dinner with his friends that we call the upper room, having just been betrayed by one of them. He was going to a place, he asked some of his friends to go with him. He was about ready just to plead to God, and he was going to be arrested. He's being treated unjustly. He was about to go to the cross. And he says, just to this small group of friends who was with him, he says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. This isn't weakness. This is strong people. This is human beings who in the natural progression of living in this broken world go through very difficult things. And maybe this isn't you right now. Thank God if it isn't you right now. Genuinely, I'm actually teaching you to thank God if it isn't you right now. That if you're in a place in life right now that isn't deep or serious trouble, where things are going pretty well, and you can probably anticipate that there were times like this in the past, or there would be times that are coming, but thank God if you're not. But here's what I would say to you if you're not. Someone in your orbit is. They might live under your roof. They might be at your workplace. They might sit next to you at your son's soccer game. But somebody in your orbit is going through deep and serious trouble. And what are they supposed to do with that time of life? And might I suggest to you that if you're in a good place right now, and there is someone in your orbit who has deep and serious trouble, that perhaps God has placed you there to walk with them, to encourage them, to be a follower of Jesus, to be what a follower of Jesus would be in the life of someone who's just knee deep or neck deep in it right now. You see, one of the things I want everyone to know about our church, I want them to know about people in your orbit is it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. We don't have to pretend. In fact, nobody should pretend. Pretending helps no one. To act like I have it together when I don't have it together. To pretend that the deep and serious trouble never gets its hooks in me. It really is okay to not be okay. And in this place, it's okay to not be okay. If you're a person who feels like it's unraveling, you're in the right place. If you're a person who is impoverished or bitter or angry, you're in the right place. If you're a person who goes to bed hopeless or just wakes up sad or honestly hasn't had a good night's sleep in a long time because of all that's weighing on you, it's okay to not be okay. We are a community. We are a place where we don't hide that, we help with that. And this passage, Romans chapter 12, verse 12, gives us great wisdom for how to help with it. Now, before I read this passage to you, I want to give you a quote that I think will help some of us think about the feelings that we feel, especially in the dark times of life. This is some great wisdom from a woman named Lisa Turkist. She says, feelings are indicators, not dictators. Oh, this is huge. Feelings are indicators. They're not dictators. They can indicate where your heart is in the moment. But that doesn't mean they have the right to dictate your behavior and boss you around. You know, we live in a world where there's a pretty interesting conversation around feelings right now. Because, hear this, whatever feelings you feel, the feelings are valid. They're feelings. And if you're ever across the table from someone and they say, I feel something, or they express how they're feeling, don't ever look at them and say, no, you don't, or no, you shouldn't. They're just telling you how they feel. That's valid. Feelings are indicators. But on the flip side, feelings are not dictators. In a world where we shape the idea of our identities almost entirely by looking inward to ourselves, one of the mistakes that we make is we think how we feel is who we are. And however we feel not only is who we are right now, but it's probably who we're going to be. That I potentially even should take those feelings and embrace all of them and let them guide my next steps. But the very feelings that some people embrace and let guide their next steps, that was not the intention of the feeling. The feeling was an indicator to get your attention that something's wrong. And the feeling becomes a moment of reconciliation to say, wait. It's true. I have to acknowledge I feel this way. But what would lead me out of this? Not leave me sitting in it. The feelings do not dictate where we go. And the scriptures help. Because this is what Romans chapter 12, verse 12 says. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. I don't want it to sound like a formula, but I do want you to receive it as a gift. That God, when people face deep and serious trouble, leads us out of it with things we can actually get our minds around and start to put into practice in our lives. to become joyful in hope, to be patient through the affliction, and to be faithful in prayer. And I'm going to run us through this in two scenarios. The first scenario I actually want to take is, how would you think about this passage when someone who's in your orbit, let's say it this way, when someone who is near you is going through the real pain of life? In fact, if you would pause with me just for a moment and bring someone to mind, someone who is in your orbit and you know they're going through something tough, really tough right now. And you think, I don't know how I would engage that. I don't know what I would do. This passage helps you know what to do in these moments. We begin with being joyful in hope. Now, a word of warning. When I say be joyful in hope, I am not saying use some bumper sticker cliche that you've heard somewhere along the way and just kind of toss it their way and hope that it works. This isn't the time just to walk up and casually say to someone, God's got this. It is not the time to kind of pat someone on the head and say, everything happens for a reason. It'll all work out. Listen, people know if you're just trivializing the thing that they're going through, and that is not what they need right now. However, you do have the chance to be a true agent of hope in their lives. When someone's in deep and serious trouble and things look very dark to them, they need somebody to light a light, to bring some hope, to create some expectation that they just can't see right now. It was Aristotle, I believe, who first said, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. For you and I to imagine that you and I, or the people who are going through difficult things, see the world accurately, see God accurately, see things accurately, it's just a misnomer. We don't see things as they are. We filter everything through our own experience and our own feelings. We see things as we are. But when I get the chance to have a conversation with someone, to encourage them, that the way things are now are not the way things always will be. They're not the way things have to be. And certainly they are not the way they're not the way you have to decide to continue digging a hole. We become agents of hope. How would you do this with somebody who's going through something tough? I think most of the time a story is probably the most helpful. You know, many of you who are around here have heard stories from my life over time, the ups and the downs. And, you know, I don't have time to tell you the whole story, but our journey as foster parents and adoptive parents was way low before it was high. And we were aiming at something we thought God was leading us to, 3 little girls who we thought we would bring into our home and would be our daughters. And it all fell apart. And it was deep and serious trouble in my soul. Years later, we have 2 sons that we didn't think that we'd have that bring tremendous joy to our lives. And I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see that. I had a picture of what the end was supposed to be, but it actually was only the midpoint of a story. And I couldn't see it until we got to the end of the story, but I've told that story to so many people who are in a low point, just to say, I don't know how yours is going to turn out, but I do know this. It's not hopeless. Be joyful in hope. Be patient in affliction. The word patient in the Bible, sometimes it's misunderstood, I think, because we think of patient as, I have to wait, I'm at a red light. Those slow people in front of me, I got to wait. But that's not what patience is in the Bible. The word patience is probably better translated endurance. The King James version of the Bible, this old English version that was written in 1611, It uses the word for this, long suffering. That you'll have to endure suffering a long time. That's what patience is. And if you're encouraged in that way, then you start to say, hey, it was dark yesterday and it's dark today and it might be dark tomorrow. I'm going to have to wait this out. That's true. But actually enduring hard things can make you stronger. There's a quote that's been floating around. I actually don't entirely agree with it, but I do think it's interesting to make us think. This is what it says. It says, hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. And then you see the cycle. I think this can be true. You can definitely point to periods of history where this has been true. But it's also not automatically true. Just take the first line. Hard times create strong men. Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes hard times take men out. But sometimes it is true that the strongest people that you and I know are probably living in their strength because they endured an affliction. Because that shaped them in some way and it caused them to be stronger. I just think about people who have gone before me. My grandfather grew up dirt poor, didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. Rode the train to start a new life in a new town when he was 16 years old. Fought in the U.S. Army during World War II, got shot in the knee. Here's the one thing I know about my grandpa. He's stronger than I am. He was. There's no doubt about it. I've lived a soft life compared to him. And hard times built a strength and a resilience and a grit inside of him. I could say the same thing's true for my dad and for my father-in-law. And it absolutely can be true. I want to encourage you and have you encourage others that being patient in affliction is actually a workout for your muscles. Not these muscles. The muscles that give you the strength later on to overcome. The perspective that you need to see God at work and what you can endure and what you can accomplish. That in a time of affliction, of deep and serious trouble, it actually can be profitable for you in the long term. The scriptures are teaching us to say, hey, be joyful in hope, be patient in affliction, and then be faithful in prayer. And particularly when this is someone near you and you're in their orbit, I want to encourage you to be a person of deep and serious prayer for their deep and serious trouble. Why is it that the power we have access to, we so seldom access? Do you know how remarkable it could be that if you have a friend, a family member, someone you love, and they're going through deep and serious trouble, and you walk with them and you say, I will pray for you, I will pray with you, you text them the prayers that you're going to pray, you pray them every day, you set a reminder in your phone to be persistent in that prayer, and you see God work. You see, this is the opposite of self-help. This is the opposite of thinking, when I'm going through something tough, I have to find the strength inside of me. The whole passage is saying it's not inside of you. There's a hope that is beyond you. There is something that the affliction is going to build out of you. And there's a power that is beyond you. And when we're faithful in prayer and ask God to intervene in people's deep and serious trouble, He does. He may or may not do it in the way that you think He should. But I promise you that He does. And to have one good friend who's a follower of Jesus, who would pray for me and pray with me, who you would pray for and you would pray with. This is what people need in their deep and serious trouble. And I'm calling on the followers of Jesus in this room, especially if you're not facing deep and serious trouble right now, to do this for someone else. And let me spend just a few minutes, going back through this list personally. When it's not necessarily someone who's near you, but instead, when it's you. When you are going through the real pain of life. I was debating which order to do this in. Should we talk about how you help someone else first, or should we talk about engaging God with your own deep and serious pain first? And it hit me that one of the conversations I often have with people who are going through something tough is that I encourage them to think about a friend who's going through something tough. And I ask them, hey, a good friend, you're a good friend to them. What advice would you give them? What encouragement would you give them? What would you say to them? And people genuinely, they come up with really remarkable things to say, oh, yeah, I definitely would not condemn them. I'd encourage them. I'd walk with them. And then I always say to people, I say, hey, you should just take your own advice. The thing that you would encourage someone else to do, that's exactly the right advice. Take your own advice. And in many ways, this is true, that when we all walk through our own deep and abiding trouble, the real pain of life, we can take the very things we would encourage in others and bring them to ourselves. We would be joyful in hope. That where you are today is absolutely not a life sentence. That with God's help, things will get brighter. Things will become more peaceful. That there is something out there for you that is better. And this isn't just generic encouragement. When I talk to people who are in deep and serious trouble, many times I see what they're trying to do. I see that they're trying to reach inside of themselves. And when they reach inside of themselves, they feel empty and weak. And if you're empty and weak and you're in a bad spot, that's a bad combination. But the problem is we're looking in the wrong place. We're not supposed to look inside of ourselves. The question isn't, am I strong enough? We'll get to this passage in Romans. It's in Romans 15, but this is a cornerstone passage about hope in the scriptures. And actually, it's my prayer for all of you who are right now in deep and serious trouble. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you stop trusting in yourself. As you stop the philosophy that says, if it's going to be, it's up to me. May the God of hope fill you with joy and with peace when you give up on the idea that you have to be strong enough to make it through this. May the God of hope fill you with joy and with peace as you trust in Him. You transfer it from me, the one who is powerless, to Him who has unlimited power, so that you may overflow with hope by the power not of yourself, but of the Holy Spirit, God who resides in you as a follower of Jesus. It is lifting our eyes off of ourselves. It's finishing the assumption that I need to get through this. And it is transferring to the one who is outside of me, beyond me, stronger than me, and the one, for those of us who are followers of Jesus, that I already said I placed my whole trust in. That in this situation, I will trust in Him. To be patient in affliction. To gird yourself, to understand that you won't snap your fingers and it'll be different tomorrow. but to say, God, I can wait this out with you. When the rains come and the winds blow, I'll still be standing because the storms don't last forever. And through long-suffering endurance, God, I won't turn my back on you. And then for you, about your deep and abiding and serious trouble, to be faithful in prayer. You know, there have to be people in this room who are going through deep and serious trouble, and you've been praying about it. You have. And I want to encourage you to continue in that. The challenge of that, the days when it feels like the prayers are hitting off the ceiling and they're not going anywhere. It doesn't seem like anything's happening right now. I want to encourage you in that. But it's possible there's people in this room who are going through deep and serious trouble. And prayer isn't really part of the habit right now. Certainly not faithful in prayer, where you're asking God to lift the darkness. You are asking God to bring the peace. You're asking God to change the attitudes in the marriage. You're asking God to do something in your son that you've tried and you can't do. You are asking God because God holds the whole world in his hands. And when we're in a dark spot, when we cry out to him, he's always there. Suncrest, whether it's you or whether it's someone in your orbit, be joyful in hope. Be patient in affliction. And be faithful in prayer. Will you stand with me? I'm going to pray for us. Well, I really hope that was helpful for integrating faith with life. Listen, if you're in Northwest Indiana, I'd love to have you join us in person. Head over to suncrest.org and plan your visit.